we are going to start tonight's meeting. If would you call the meeting to order, please?
Absolutely. It's 7:03 p.m. And if you'd like, I will take roll call. Jason Giard. Jason Giard. Pellegrini. Aaron Pellegrini.
Here.
David Smith.
Andy Cabarrus.
Andy Cabarrus.
Here.
Carl Hubner.
And Pinkerton Student
And
Liaison.
Pinkerton Student Liaison Shannon Cappell.
Thank you.
Thank you. And also seated at the board table is Superintendent of Schools Bob Thompson and CFO Jeff Dowd.
At this time, if we could
all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. So before we start,
I just have one thing that I just wanted to share.
the board would like to take
a moment to acknowledge the passing of Robert P. Little on September 27, 2023.
Robert was a valued
Hsd School District retiree, having dedicated 20 years of administrative educational services to our students. He began his Hsd career in the spring of 1978 as HMS principal. In 1993, he transitioned solely to the Central School until his retirement in June of 1999. His effective leadership was clearly demonstrated during his tenure as principal of both schools. The board, the SAU, and the school community send their deepest condolences to Mr. Little's family. The board members, if you want to look through your packets, we have
two sets of meeting
minutes
for approval.
One is for the regular meeting on October 10th, and the other is for the budget work session on October 17th. So we can approve these together, correct?
Absolutely.
Go ahead and make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for both meetings.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next up, we have public comments. I don't think we have any public comments today.
That's correct. I did check with the crowd earlier.
Okay.
No one came forward.
Okay. Right.
So next up
is school highlights. So we have our student liaison, Shannon Cappell, with an update on PA.
Tomorrow, Wednesday, October 25th, is an early release set. Pinkerton Players Fall Play Antigone in Munich opens again. To get your ticket, we started building vertically on the new social studies building. Over the next 3 weeks, the internal and exterior walls of the first floor will be built.
Seniors
have begun ordering their cap and gowns. Progress reports come out November 8th. Students in Mrs. Roy's field biology class got into the world exploring local ponds and waters, taking samples to test it. Boys varsity soccer went to penalty kicks today, ending in a tough loss for the Astros. They fought really hard with no goals, no scores for 100 minutes.
I forgot to mention
a few weeks ago that we had German exchange students come to campus, and it was really awesome to get to know them and learn all about their culture and compare the difference between the countries. It was really cool. This week is Red Ribbon Week. Students can take a pledge to be drug-free. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you so much. Anybody have any questions? So we are going to move forward to current business. Looks like we have a HMS lacrosse program presentation.
I am pleased to be able to bring up some guests tonight. I was approached several months ago about the idea of lacrosse having teams at our school. Hempstead has a strong lacrosse program. I know it's come up before where there have been conversations with, could the school support having teams in the school? And so we've been having some conversations about that, and it was obviously not something budgeted for this year, but we have some eager people. You can see this is the biggest audience I've seen since I've been here. I'm not sure who's seen a bigger audience, but maybe a few years ago when some contentious topics were up. But it's nice to see a large audience. Anyway, people in this community have been really gung-ho to make this happen and be able to present a proposal to the board, and hoping that you will accept the proposal. So I would like to bring up some people who are ready to speak to lacrosse at Hempstead Middle School.
Hey, board members. My name's Dan Nicolini, Hampstead resident and the girls coordinator for HILA, the Hampstead Youth Lacrosse Association. Rather than sitting up here and you guys hearing me drone on and on, the students of Hampstead Middle School, both current and past, would like to speak to why they believe the program would benefit the community and the school.
Lacrosse has been a highly popular and successful recreational travel program in Hampstead for many years. For the spring 2023 season, HILA had 70 middle school-aged athletes, 41 girls and 29 boys registered in the program. These numbers remain consistent from year to year and are competitive with the number of athletes playing on other Hampstead town teams or other HMS teams.
The addition of a lacrosse program at HMS would also make Hampstead more competitive with surrounding towns. Of the 6 major towns that feed into Pinkerton, 3, Derry, Hooksett, and Auburn, already offer middle school lacrosse. Many other towns surrounding Hampstead, including Londonderry, Hudson, and Timberlane, offer middle school lacrosse. Hampstead lacrosse players matriculating into Pinkerton are currently at a disadvantage, as they have had less playing time and less exposure to the competition of their surrounding towns as compared to their peers.
The HMS administration has been interested in implementing a lacrosse program for several years, but has not had the resources or funding to get it off the ground. They have started an external funding that could provide for the program's inaugural year. It would pave the way for it to be added to the budget for future years.
The HILA board is working with the HMS administration on the logistics of creating this program, and its members have extensive experience in all aspects of lacrosse and youth programs. We have identified the associated costs of implementing the program through working with established middle school programs such as Hooksett, Timberlane, and Goffstown, as well as the research which was completed by HMS Athletic Director Nancy Benson.
To implement a middle school lacrosse program that offers 2 teams, 1 boys and 1 girls, will require approximately $15,000 in funds, with approximately $6,000 being initial startup costs. The initial cost will be uniforms for $4,000, balls with nets $1,014, balls for practice and girls and boys games $444, and safety equipment $500. Annual costs are coaches' stipends $4,100, $2,050 for each team. Ref and officials cost $1,500, and transportation $3,500.
We come before you with positive news that over 90% of the funding requirement has already been met through donations from various Hampstead community clubs and programs, which are in support of this effort. HILA has committed to providing the remaining funds and plans to host a fundraising day at the middle school to continue raising awareness and community interest.
In closing, we hope that the board recognizes the community desire and need for a middle school lacrosse program and will approve the request to implement the program for the 2023 to 2024 school year, as there will be no impact to the existing school year budget.
I don't know if the board has any questions before we allow our guests to sit.
I just first
want to say that I appreciate every single one of you getting up here and speaking. I know it can be nerve-wracking, and you guys did a beautiful job. And I really appreciate the detail that went into this. Highlighting what the costs, all the costs are, the whole breakdown and everything. I really appreciate that. You guys did a great job.
we won't make you stand there.
We won't make you stand there.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Leah, Ava, Mo, Landon, and Callum.
And I just have to say,
It's really been a pleasure working with so many invested people in something like this, to provide something that's really for our students. That's what we're all about. And the community support is top-notch. It's just really amazing how the community has rallied around this idea. So we would ask that the board vote to approve the lacrosse program.
so I think we have
Probably a few questions that we'll ask first. Please.
whoever wants to.
Now I'm in the hot seat.
All right, so one of my questions, it says on here that we have 41 girls and 29 boys that typically register to play out of the middle school level. This isn't in place of HILA, this is in addition to HILA. So those students that might not make the school team will still have an opportunity to play elsewhere.
100%.
All right, and then obviously we'll continue to do it for our littles in town.
Of course. Yeah, nothing changes. We do expect them to prioritize middle school over HILA, but we know that the diehards, we know the diehard lacrosse players are going to want to do both, right? They're going to want to go from middle school lacrosse practice to HILA, playing middle school games during the week and HILA during the weekend.
I just wanted to make sure that if someone didn't make the school team,
Yep.
they still have an opportunity to play in town.
Absolutely still a place, yeah.
I think my question
I think my question was based on how the and I don't know if this is more for you or how the working of equipment. I mean, obviously we would be getting uniforms. What else would we provide, and what would the families provide? Because I know, like baseball, softball, they bring a lot of their own equipment.
One thing that wasn't listed here, the middle school actually was awarded a grant through U.S. Lacrosse for equipment, being both boys and girls game, full goalie gear, and like 10 field player gear, 10 field players equipment gear. So for any athlete player that doesn't have their own, they can use what the school has now been granted. However, I think most will want to opt to use their own equipment.
As far as helmets, those are going to be school issued, is that?
No, in typical fashion, they would be the ones that are owned by the school, that they now, yes, those are school issued, but the helmets would be the individual players. They have to conform to the same no-cast requirements that are in high school and other levels.
My usual question is, are we going to have enough coaches? But it seems like we have plenty of community support, so I'm not worried about that.
Anybody have any additional questions?
Bob, this one will be for you. This isn't going to take the place of any of our existing sports teams or anything at the school level, at least for the first year, correct?
No, we have the benefit of, the rec department, uses the fields at Depot. We don't have a spring team that currently uses the field here. So adding this is something that's definitely manageable. We go into this knowing that, field maintenance is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on because we typically have rested the field in the spring. But that's certainly something that we can address. I know, sometimes people kind of wonder, well, will there be less kids trying out for other sports if we add lacrosse? And the reality is that a lot of the players, they've been playing since they were very young, some as young as 3 years old. So typically we're not taking players from other sports. They've kind of committed, by middle school they've committed to the sport that they're playing. This really represents just another opportunity for our students to have an after-school activity. And I really commend the work that so many people have done to be thoughtful about this proposal I had a ton of questions. I've been satisfied with all of the answers that I've gotten to those questions. I think if you look at the moving forward, the impact on the budget, overall budget, very minimal and doable, and the return on the investment is huge.
Does anybody have any additional questions? So I think this is a two-part thing, or do I have to do it, or do we do it separately? So we make a motion and then also accepting the
grant money.
the donation. Can I do it as one, or do I do it as two? Okay. So,
The other thing too is, I think that you want Mrs. Gilbert to speak to the donations.
oh, that's true. I'm just skipping ahead, sorry about that. If you could speak to the donation part of it, that would be great.
I certainly can.
Acknowledge that part of it.
As I mentioned, the donations and community support is outstanding, so we are asking for you to approve 3 donations tonight. The first is from the Hsd Mothers Club in the amount of $3,500. The second is Hsd PTSA in the amount of $1,500, and the third is the Lions Club in the amount of $2,000. And we thank those community organizations very much for their donations.
Okay, so I think we should, does anybody want to make a motion to accept the proposal to add a lacrosse team to the middle school?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any questions? Good. And then the next part is someone make a motion to accept the donations provided by the, can I do it as a lump, by the Mothers Club, the Lions Club, and the PTSA?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right. Thumbs up.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
All right.
You sure you guys want to hang out for
If
the
you
next
guys
2
want to
hours?
leave, you can now, 'cause we're going to go into a lot of other things.
You don't want to stay for the budget presentation? I mean, come on.
Thank you. I mean, I thought they were going to clap like that for the budget. Sorry. All right.
Hi, Drew.
All right. Do you want to give this a minute, or
Yeah, we'll give it a minute.
quiet down a little bit? Look at, they're even putting all their chairs away.
You can break down their own chairs?
I know.
That's awesome.
Okay. No, that's great. That's great. They really did their homework. I think that's great. Right. They had everything.
We're
Yeah.
only approving this if they continue to pick up the chairs, set up the chairs for all of our board meetings.
All right, we should probably try to move forward. Let's see, where are we next? Oh, we have the budget presentation, so we should wait. We'll be right with you. We're just waiting for some chairs. All right, so next up on the agenda is the school district department budget presentation. You're the one that told them they could go.
I'm only in for the first 2 slides anyway, so. All right. All right, good evening. So I just want to thank all of the parents and students that came out for the lacrosse presentation. I thought that was wonderful. I did realize that they probably weren't going to stick around for the budget, although it is equally exciting. So tonight is probably one of my favorite nights when it comes to board meetings, because we get to give sort of the first glance at next year's operating budget, which for me I'm very proud of, because obviously the operating budget represents all of our costs so that we can keep the trains running and we can fund the school district. But more importantly than that, the operating budget is sort of the articulation of our vision. And I say our because it's this team behind me. And you'll see, this is where we can identify our priorities. We can align, our financial resources to our strategic plan. And tonight, the public gets the first glimpse of that. And I would encourage the public, if you go on to the school district website, the presentation that we have here and the budget report with detail is actually on there as well. It's a very lengthy document, but you'll be able to go on when we're talking about some of our new items and you want to dive really deeply. This is the document that you'll go to. If you want to know how many Band-Aids our nurse is ordering next year, it's in this document, right? If you want to know how much money we plan to spend on professional development, it's in this document. So please go online, ask the questions. We'd love to engage you in the conversation. So if we move to the agenda. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction, then we're going to go over the department reports. Tonight's presentation is really the expenses for the department. So what you won't see tonight, which is still a work in progress, is staffing. So when we start to talk about department and school budgets, we're talking about the funds that they control to make the purchases they need to do and create the priorities that they need to create. So each of them will come up and they'll present their department budget, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. So overarching goals. In the construction of our operating budget, we really have 4 overarching goals. Number 1 is we are here to ensure the financial commitment to the values and priorities that are identified in the Hsd strategic plan. Again, we are highly committed to being a school district of continuous improvement. Every year we want to be just a little bit better than we were the year before. In order for us to do that, we need to make sure that we have the financial resources to do that. So tonight you will hear from our directors and our principals about how they are going to move the instructional program forward through the budgeting process. Also, another priority is to keep Hampstead's educational facilities in good working order. I put an emphasis on keep. There has been a great deal of financial investment made in the 2 facilities here. They're in great working condition. People comment on that consistently. And that's because the school board and the taxpayers have made a commitment year over year to maintaining those financial assets. Also, we want to ensure robust information technology systems that support and strengthen our instructional and operational capabilities. I would add to this, I'd really emphasize when we talk about our IT infrastructure as an investment and a priority for our budget, we're really talking about cybersecurity this year. That is a really big focus, knowing that there's been a significant increase in cyber attacks with schools and municipalities, not just around the country, but even here in neighboring school districts. And then finally, we recognize that the taxpayers in this town make a huge investment when it comes to the schools through their local property taxes. We're very aware of that. And that's why, the process that we use to budget, as the board is aware, is a zero-based budgeting model. We build the budget every year from the ground up. We don't just carry over numbers from last year and add a certain percentage. We identify what our needs are, what our wants are, and we build the budget based upon actuals. So again, when I open by talking about Band-Aids, that's because we ask our teachers, our nurses, our counselors, our office folks to really identify, tell us exactly what it is that you need. This creates a great deal of transparency, and it allows taxpayers to know, like, we're doing the absolute best that we can to keep an eye on the bottom line. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over. We're going to start with the Hampstead Central School.
Good evening. The HCS proposed budget for the 24-25 school year is $209,287. I said that upside down, but I'll work on that. Our current budget for this year is $250,020, a difference of $40,733. As we look at our projected enrollment for next year, we're looking at a potential increase of up to 5 students. Our kindergarten and preschool numbers fluctuate from year to year. We do use some prediction software, but we don't have those estimates in yet. So 85 is a pretty comfortable number to predict for our incoming kindergartners. You'll also see our current kindergarten moving up to grade 1 of an increase of 8 students. We had at least 9 families that sought private kindergarten this year as a result of us being unable to fulfill the need of full-day kindergarten. So some of the highlights of our budget for next year that I want to make sure I bring to your attention is an increase in our language arts supply line of $4,770. That increase is because of an initiative that we began last year called One School, One Book, where every child, adult, volunteer, person that works in our school gets a copy of a shared text that we spend time reading together to build community and literacy skills. Last year that was funded through a grant, and I'm looking to move the book purchase into our regular funding. There's another part to that project too, which is also an enrichment portion where we want to bring in a guest speaker. I have eliminated that from the proposal for 24-25. One place where we're realizing a savings is in our social studies supply line. We're moving away from more of those textbook print materials to more of a digital format. Our teachers have embraced Scholastic News, which has a significant online component, and so we're able to realize some savings through that. Our information access fees line is up considerably, about $3,800, and that's due to an increase in digital subscription prices. You see that most frequently through our assessments, through like iReady and our Acadians programming. Our library information access fees are also up $1,945, and that's because we're trying to incorporate something called book breaks into our budget. Book breaks was funded last year through our PTSA, and book breaks brings virtual authors visits right to our school. Bringing an author in to talk with students is very cost prohibitive, but utilizing this book breaks program, we can bring high quality authors right into the classroom in a Zoom format for our students. And finally, I want to bring your attention to the last item, which is furniture. We're going to realize a savings of about $20,000. We began a replacement furniture cycle for our classroom furniture this school year. But due to the shifting priorities, we're going to defer that replacement cycle for a year in this upcoming budget. Are there any questions? No?
We'll see, yeah, we can take questions at the end.
Okay, for the middle school, the proposed budget is $200,069. The current is $206,538 with a decrease in $6,469. Our enrollment for next year will go up about 11 students. That's because we're graduating a smaller class than we'll be taking in from the current 4th grade. And some of the highlights of the middle school budget are an increase of $6,500 for after-school activities and overnight field trips. This money will allow for additional school programming, after-school clubs and activities, and also allow for, now that we have kind of, the plan is to continue the Washington DC overnight trip as well as the Nature's Classroom overnight trip, would allow for some compensation to staff who attend those overnight trips and give up quite a bit of time to be with students for a length for several days. In athletics, it's an increase of $8,500. Part of this is the increase with the newly approved 2 lacrosse teams, is also increased costs for officials and transportation. In our social studies department, we are seeing an increase of $823.71. This is due to additional supplies being requested for some of the project-based learning that they're doing. Each grade level is really have some big projects that they are wanting to do, have begun to do, and want to continue to do, and are asking for the supplies to do that. And having said that, we're seeing a savings of $750 due to the decreased need for textbooks, as they're using other sources in the learning environment and really working to do more hands-on, as I said, project-based learning. And then the last item is professional learning consultant, and that is an addition of $10,000. This is an item that we really talked about. This is under professional development. Mrs. Tomaselli has had that in her budget in the past, but it really is middle school specific, so it made sense for that to come into the middle school budget. And this is coaching for teachers. You know, in the strategic plan, I talked earlier in the year about the work that we have to do on assessment and grading and instructional practices, and that's the coaching with our staff to do that work. We have somebody working with us right now who started a little bit last year in the spring and has worked with us a few days already this year, and that work is going really well, and teachers are doing some really fantastic work, so I'm excited and hopeful that we can keep that going. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So I am here to review the student services budget. As you can see, there is a difference of about $933,200. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk you through some of those increases. And so I'll start with other professional services. And as I've highlighted in multiple presentations to the board and the community, that this Department of Student Services is a big umbrella. It basically covers any additional services a child needs outside of just the general education setting, so any additional support service. And depending on what type of service that is, we either have those service providers staffed, or we have to contract with outside contractors to provide that service. So I'll give you an example. Vision services. We have students that may have vision services, yet we don't have a full-time vision teacher, and so we would need to contract for those vision services for those students. The other unique piece about our district is that student services does not stop at grade 8. And so we are responsible for providing any of those additional professional services for our students who attend Pinkerton. And so in those other professional services, what needs to be noted is any additional professional service that's not provided through Pinkerton is provided, is in this budget, and we contract for those services for those students to receive that at Pinkerton. And so because of the increase in students with disabilities through grades pre-K through 12, that has had a cost increase. In addition to that, we've been unable to fill some of the full-time roles in our district, such as our registered behavior technicians and our paraprofessionals, and so we've had to use contractors to fill those positions, and so you'll see an increase due to that as well. The next area of increase is tuition to private and other schools, and this really is students that are placed outside of our school district because the team has decided that placement is required for that child to receive a free and appropriate public education outside of their district. And so due to the increased student needs requiring this specialized type of program and placement, we have had an increase in that area as well. We've also had some students move into the district that require alternative placements, and so that is also an increase in costs. The next line is Pinkerton tuition. And so when our students go to Pinkerton, we pay a baseline rate for tuition. Anything over and above the general education tuition, that is the responsibility of student services to pick up in tuition. So if the IEP team at Pinkerton determines that that student requires the resource room, the ACT program, the PASSES program, then we incur an additional cost on top of the tuition. And so just to give you an idea, the ACT program itself will probably cost $41,000 per student attending next year. And so it's just, I think it's helpful for you to know that the tuition, the baseline tuition, is not encompassing of all costs. And so we do have to account for those additional programming and student needs through the student services budget. Another area you'll see an increase is specialized transportation. And again, when we increase the needs of students requiring specialized programming and placement, that transportation costs increase as well because students need to attend the program, and it is our responsibility to provide transportation there. Additionally, our transportation costs have gone up overall from the transportation company we use, and we're going out to bid this fall, and so we'll be looking at bids to see if we can potentially have some cost savings in that area. The next line is preschool special education curriculum. As you know, last year we had to, at the end of last year, adjust our programming to meet the needs of our incoming preschool students, and so we shifted one of the classrooms to a special education classroom. That's new for Hempstead. And so we really needed to look at our curriculum and make sure that we had curriculum that meets the needs of our students requiring specially designed instruction. And so through that, our newly hired, duly certified preschool teacher, we went through our current curriculum and what would need to be supplemented to ensure that we were meeting the needs of all kids. And so that is an increase because we have changed programming. And lastly, you'll see a decrease, and that is, so professional services for our English second language speakers, that had been a higher rate because previous we did not have a dedicated ESOL teacher, and so going into next year we will not need to contract for as much services because we won't need to have someone come in and do the assessments. What we will need to keep there for professional services is any interpretation services we may need, whether that would be to translate documents or whether that would be to provide interpretation services for a family when a meeting occurs, that they would need those, and that is our federal obligation, as well as all of the increase in costs are based on our federal obligation to meet the needs of students under IDEA. Thank you.
Good evening, school board. Our technology proposed budget is $433,159. The current budget that we're working off of is $360,163, for a difference of $72,996. I'm going to speak to you about some of the technology highlights. We have a decrease of $9,345. We will not be using Zoom after December. We are going to utilize Google Meet, which is integrated into Google Apps for education. This is going to relieve some of the stress levels of the students during the remote days due to inclement weather. Google Meets is built into the Google Suite, which means that it's optimized for Chromebook usage. It's going to be a lot better and a lot easier to use for both the students and the teachers. Next up, we have a decrease of $10,479. This is a completed project that we completed this year, replacing old projectors. We have another decrease of $1,154, and this was to replace any failed UPS batteries for the uninterruptible power supplies that we use to protect our servers and infrastructure. Next up, the big ticket item for technology is the cybersecurity infrastructure update. This is an increase of $82,490. This is replacement infrastructure hardware that consists of switches, hosts, and storage area networks. This has included 5 years license and service on all devices. The current hardware that we're working off of was deployed in 2017-2018 school year. So we are coming up to end of life on this, and it is something that was recognized in our security audit that we need to replace. I would also like to say that the cybersecurity infrastructure update touches upon my contribution to the strategic plan, which is to address cybersecurity recommendations to ensure the safety and integrity of the Hempstead School District's digital infrastructure and data. Next up, we have an increase of $7,495. This is a staff administrative laptop rotation. We replace administrative computers every 4 years. We also have an increase of $1,800. This is a network backup device. This is a replacement network attached storage, otherwise known as a NAS, N-A-S. This is what we use to back up our virtual networks internally in case of any kind of issues that we need to restore. And lastly, on this highlight, I have $4,102 for an increase, and this is for Chromebook protective cases for grades 1 and 2. This is going to be providing extra drop protection in these grades, and that will complete the technology portion.
On to facilities. Proposed budget, $830,168. Current is $881,481, with a decrease of just over $51,000. On to the highlights. I'm looking at getting a truck with a dump insert and plow to replace our 15-year-old van that did not pass inspection and now has been decommissioned for $69,358. Replace mower, Exmark 60-inch mower with bagger at $17,795. That's usual replacement cycle. I'm looking at roofing a small section of the Hampstead Central School at $41,097. I am looking at adding air conditioning to the library and computer class at the Hampstead Middle School, which is a $35,203 add. For decreases, we have the oil tank replacement and removal at the Hampstead Central School, which is $167,000. That project is now complete. Indoor air quality testing, we usually sub that out. Currently this year I purchased the equipment for much less than that, and I'm just going to be doing it in-house to save us $6,273. The stage wall build at the Hampstead Central School, that project is complete. That was $21,000. A folding chair replacement for $6,890. That replacement's complete. And last, the tree removal and site work at the Hampstead Central School, $5,130. That project is now complete.
Hello, I'm here to talk about the curriculum budget. You'll notice a proposed dollar amount of $176,995. Some of that money that is proposed are contractual minimums in our CBA, so I'm going to talk about some of the highlights that are outside of that that involve curriculum materials. We are coming in under budget this year with a $67,000 difference from last year's proposed budget. So in the line items this year, you will see a $7,000 increase. That is to pay for late busing at the Hampstead Middle School. That would be Tuesdays and Thursdays every week for the entire school year. We have been currently paying for that with an ESSER grant. It runs us about $650 a month. So that busing has provided incredibly valuable for students to be able to participate in after-school academic support clubs, enrichment programming such as robotics, the STEM classes. Even some of our theater students have been able to utilize it, so we felt it was very valuable. You'll see a line item for $11,638. That is a one-year math curriculum renewal. We're licensing with Big Ideas, which is the product we use for K-8 through 8 math, is expiring this year, but where we just implemented a new English language arts curriculum this year, we want to kind of just buy a 1 year and separate out those curriculum review cycles. So that licensing will include online access, so online licensing, as well as student work texts and We think it will just be helpful for us to have a more thorough program review next year. I have also budgeted for Summer Learning Academy. As you know, we've been paying for Summer Learning Academy with ESSER funding, and also this past year with another grant from the DOE. We approximate $28,754 for Summer Learning Academy costs. That will include transportation for some experiential learning opportunities, supply lines for each of the teachers who home grow their own weekly activities, contracts with some external service providers. This past year we had the Brown Center from UNH, and we had the Trek Passage program, as well as Renaissance Kids, and then also staffing costs. And then lastly, the science curriculum review. This we're approximating to be $4,480. This is really going to go towards teachers' curriculum development. So unlike our English language arts recent purchase, we are going to home grow our science curriculum because our teachers are pretty masterful in this area, and they really want to incorporate hands-on learning, phenomena-based instruction, and the inquiry teaching skills. So I'm really excited about this curriculum review. Our PLC meetings are already underway, kind of gathering resources. We are going to leverage some open source technology. So open source are curriculum products that are free for public schools to use. So we're looking at Open Science Ed, which provides our teachers and students with models and simulations for each unit. We also currently have an agreement with the DOE for Discovery Ed and Mystery Science through 2025. So when you package all of those three kind of free resources together with some of our other homegrown resources, we're going to be able to pull off a science curriculum for very little cost. And that's it. Our next slide here talks about our Pinkerton enrollment. And you can see our actuals as of October 1st versus our projected enrollment for next year. So I'll give you a minute to look at that. It's a slight decrease. This time next year we'll have 4 fewer students. We did have a very large freshman class go up this current year. We also have this year 4 students participating in the HiSET and ACT programs. We are projecting a 5th student to participate in that next year. And you can see a slight uptick in our enrollment in elementary and middle schools, as the principals have already reported. This next slide talks about the tuition at Pinkerton. So as the Hampstead LEA, of course, we are responsible for tuition over at Pinkerton. Our actuals this year are 381 students, and we have a tuition rate that is set by Pinkerton that's $15,408 for this year. And you can see the 5.8 tuition total. Next year, we'll be sending approximately 376 students, and we have estimated the tuition cost based on inflation to be $16,949. It's important to note that, as Ms. Parsons presented earlier, that is for base tuition. That does not cover special ed additional costs, transportation, late busing. We're responsible for all those additional things as well. So we're estimating the tuition to Pinkerton to be 6.3 for next year. At this time, if you have any questions, we'll now take them from the respective departments.
I had a question for Dr. Cheney. With that increase of the first grade by 8 students, do you have any concerns with class sizes and the ability to manage those? I know that's kind of outside of the budget discussion, but.
Yeah, so this year we currently have 5 sections of first grade. With the anticipated 80 students for next year, we would still be within policy, which is 18 at first grade.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
And then more of a comment for Jess and the student services. Obviously no one's fault. I'm just shocked at that number of the financial impact that having those open positions causes and having to contract out for those. That was just a shocking number to me.
And we still have those open paraprofessional and RBT positions, so if there's anyone out there that would like to apply, we are ongoing rolling interviews.
Excellent. And then as far as tuition to private schools, is there any background that you can share? Is that due to inadequate facilities to meet the needs of those specialized, students, or?
That's a great question. So sometimes environment does play a role in the team decision for placement. Sometimes it's the type of services that are provided. Sometimes it's the degree of which the disability impacts the students and what type of specialized program they need. All of the students or the out-of-district programs that are listed here are all state-approved special education programs, which we are obligated to place students at if we don't feel that we can meet their needs within the district. So sometimes environment plays a part in it, but overall it's looking at what services and supports the child needs to make sure that they are accessing a free and appropriate education. And if that isn't something that can be implemented by the district, then we look to place in a district or in a school that can provide those services and supports.
I guess, so would you kind of connect the two, the open positions? Are the open positions impacting that ability to serve the students, and is that causing us to look elsewhere?
No, I wouldn't say that the open positions currently are causing students to need to be placed outside. I think that I want to commend both building principals on their ability to be flexible and fluid in terms of prioritizing the needs of students and how they allocate staffing on a daily basis to meet those needs. So that's never the issue or the reason for placing, but if the degree of which the staff member needs training, type of certification, that may impact it. So we may not have that level of certification or training in our staff, and so that might warrant us to look at a placement that may have a more severe type of certification to support that student need.
Got it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Not sure who to ask about the Pinkerton numbers, but when do we expect to get the actual increases in?
I'll defer to CFO Dowd on that one.
It's usually early November, so hopefully by the next time we meet, we'll have some idea, at least as to where that number is.
All right, and we're looking at almost a 10% increase from this year to next year. Is
So-
that typical, is from what we've seen in the last few years?
We're at 8, a little over 8 this year. And so I think one of the challenges that we're up against is that if enrollments decline at Pinkerton, all of us pay a little bit more of that.
Gotcha.
So that's where the 10% is coming from.
Okay. For Mr. Dion. At our workshop, we initially had talked about an $85,000 increase, and it looks like you came down about 13 grand.
Yes.
Where was that savings from between last week and this week?
I was waiting on some quotes to come in, so anything that's going to be over $20,000, and especially if I'm going to use E-rate, has to have an RFP, which means that we put it out to bid and we get competitive pricing. I was waiting on some of those quotes to come back in, and I looked over about 5 different quotes on pretty much every piece of the technology that came in, and I was able to adjust it to make sure that we would be able to use every single piece and still save a little bit more money.
Awesome.
So that's where that came from.
Appreciate you sharpening the pencil there. That helps out a lot.
Yes.
And then the last question for Mr. Mackey. And you might not know the answer to this yet, but with the implementation of the lacrosse teams tonight, obviously we're going to see a lot more field usage. We're going to see a lot more wear and tear on the field. Are you still covered to tackle that when it comes? I mean, I'm thinking paint lines, aerating, seating. It's a different season, so.
Correct. There will be a little bit of an increase. I'm worried a little bit on condition-wise. That's a whole other area though, because these fields aren't irrigated. So we may run into an issue. That's our best field, and you're talking about going into the warmer season, so if we tear it up in the spring, it may actually not be ready to play for soccer. That's probably my one concern. However, paint, I may have to go back and look a little bit, but it shouldn't be too much of an increase. I could tack on a handful more buckets to do that, and as well as we have to mark it, so we put plugs in the ground so we know where lines are. I'd have to buy a whole nother kit for that and go from there. So.
All right, and then if you don't mind, maybe a reminder on your calendar or something, maybe like halfway through the lacrosse season, maybe provide us an update so that we know how to prepare for next year's budget for the season afterwards, just to see where you're going and what increases you might find.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Definitely.
thank you.
You got it.
I still have a question for you, Mr. Mackey.
Me?
On the trucks.
Do you want to use mine?
So the truck and the mower.
Correct, yeah.
At this point, they're basically so old that we're repairing them and we're basically throwing money away by keeping them versus getting new ones.
Pretty much, yeah.
Jeff, could you repeat the question into the microphone?
Yes, he was asking that we're putting more money into the used equipment, the mower and the truck, the van currently. And to give you more of an update, like I mentioned earlier, the van itself is 15 going on 16 years old, and it did not pass inspection. Our inspections happened in September. It needed a substantial amount of work, upwards to $7,000 minimum to get running again. So I just decommissioned it. It's not worth sinking the money into it. It's a little of an unknown, and the lawnmower itself is getting end of life. We've been putting decent amount of money into it this year. We have a very, very, very good groundskeeper who's been able to Band-Aid it to the best of his ability, and we'll get through this year easily, but next year is more of a concern. So.
And then also, because they're getting old, there'd be safety concerns.
Safety concerns, correct, yes.
Downtime.
Can I just add to that when we discussed this at our workshop, that Mr. Mackey also mentioned that having the dump truck bed to it will be beneficial because he won't be going to paying delivery fees for people to bring us things because we can do that ourselves.
Correct.
So while it's a expenditure, it will have
We'll see a
good
small return in areas
Yeah.
such as picking up materials and also taking a lot of the wear off the other truck we have. We do have 2 school locations, and when it snows, we can only be in one place at one time. So that versatility and take a lot of wear and tear off the current truck we have. So, awesome.
I have a question for Mrs. Milbury on the middle school budget. So when we had our workshop, there was a couple things that we took out of the budget, which I don't see looking through here, but the number, I was expecting the savings number to be a little bit higher, because I think those 2 line items together were about 16,000. So I was just curious if you could review where some of the other expenses came
Sure.
from.
The $10,000 went into that budget, so that wasn't there last week because it just got shifted from one section to another. The other piece that is an increase is all of the ESOL budget was had been in Dr. Cheney's budget, and so even the materials needed for 5 through 8. So we shifted that to my budget.
Okay.
That was a little bit under 1,000. So yes, I should have mentioned that tonight too, but that was the other thing that added to that to make that decrease a little bit less.
And then I haven't looked through here, but did you end up, were you able to resolve the question that we had about the line item in the budget for like the fingerprinting and things like that?
Great question. I never went back and looked at that. Mr. Dowd, where did we land on the?
Okay, great.
Between the schools.
Okay. Just for folks to understand what I'm talking about, the line item for middle school was fairly significant, but there was nothing for the central school, so we were trying to figure out what was going on there, but it just was not allocated into the central school, so I was just clarifying that. Yep. Does anybody else have any additional questions?
I just had a couple comments. Hey, and I can talk now. Field trip, Summer Learning Academy, awesome. That's very in keeping with a former board member who loves that sort of stuff, and I think it's wonderful expenditure and what we're looking as a district to do. And then for cybersecurity, it is a big item, but from personal experience, if your organization gets hacked, the amount of stress and work and money it costs, it makes it worth it to try to prevent that as much as possible. So.
I don't know if there's any additional questions.
Yeah, so again, all of the documents that our board members have, the budget detail, the budget presentation, they're all online. Feel free to reach out to anyone on this team if you have questions. The next phase for us is now the construction of the total operating budget. So now we're going to go through and look at staffing levels, look at enrollment projections. We'll get firmer numbers from Pinkerton. We'll factor in things like benefits, including health insurance, so that when we return to the board, you'll have a much clearer picture of the sort of totality of next year's operating budget. And again, I want to just commend the people behind me and their staff as well. You start the school year, there's a lot of operational needs that a school has just to begin the year. Throw on top of that the creation from scratch of an operating budget. It is a monumental task, and the people behind me seem to pull it off seamlessly. They've done a lot of work, and I appreciate this team tremendously. So, thank you.
I'll just echo that sentiment as well. Being a new school board member and attending my first budget planning meeting, it was just so open and honest and constructive, and just really, really great to see the participation, including the community participation, what little we had. So awesome.
Okay, so next up, we have some policies here for first read. We have 5 total, so I'm just gonna read these summaries for you, and then we can move on from there. The first one is EBB School Safety Program. This policy recategorized as required by law, suggested New Hampshire SBA language incorporated what was previously called the Site-Specific Emergency Response Plan is now to be titled the Site-Specific Emergency Operations Plan pursuant to HB 1125 and New Hampshire School Board Association Sample Policy EBCA. Specifies that the general safety plan will include sports injury, emergency action plan, district communication plan, and school bus safety plan. Before I move over to the summary of the next one, is there anything in there that you want to discuss to clarify or feel is?
Not specifically, other than just to say, if you read through this policy, it spells out the obligation of the school districts in several areas when it comes to our school safety program. Talks about, crisis prevention plan, emergency operation plans, sports injury plan. These are all procedures that the district does have. I would say with one exception in terms of something that we're currently working on, and that's a district communication plan. And of actually working with area superintendents so that there's a consistent plan across at least southern New Hampshire. But if you go and review this policy, you'll see that these procedures already exist, and it's really the policy just codifies the district's obligation to have them.
Great. And we'll move on. GBA, Equal Opportunity Employment. This was last updated in 2014. It's recommended to repeal and refer to the newly updated 2023 version of AC non-discrimination that includes the substance and later revisions of this policy. GBI, Staff Participation in Political Activities. More recent changes are in the second to last paragraph and are intended to reflect or carve out protections found in RSA 193:40 enacted in 2021 regarding prohibiting the teaching of discrimination. Other updates reflected then recent enforcement activity by the New Hampshire Attorney General Office relative to electioneering by public employees and additional legal fees. This one probably requires a little bit, maybe a little bit more clarification so that people know what.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Absolutely. No, I don't mind at all. So policy GBI, again, most of the language in GBI comes from current state and even federal laws. First of all, regarding electioneering. So it is a prohibitive act, both by law and soon to be by policy, for any member or employee of the Hampstead School District to use their position to try to persuade somebody's political view to get them to vote a certain way. And again, that really is part of the law and has been for a considerable amount of time. So that's a piece of this. It also affirms that, while electioneering is prohibited, school district employees do have First Amendment rights as public citizens to express their concerns or views when they are not doing so as part of their official duties. Again, the First Amendment, been around for a long time. And then finally, the last section provides some level of clarification. There is a law that was passed regarding the teaching of divisive concepts, and it just spells out the district's obligation the policy recognizes public employee freedom of expression, but does so within the parameters of all New Hampshire laws, including that recently passed law as well.
So this is actually something that came up in conversation at the state school board meeting. And for me, I mean, it's important, the idea that you're not emailing political stuff with your school email. You're not taking political points of view as a teacher within a school. Your job as a teacher is to facilitate conversations, not to participate them, if that makes sense, and to facilitate debates and how create healthy debate, but not have your point of view in that area. And I think it's good that we have something like this structured to try to, it's a delicate thing. Most of the social studies prep programs in the state, that's their intent and that's the way it's taught as well, is your job is to help create healthy citizens, but not create your politics in it. So my initial look through this and my initial thought process, I was a little hesitant on it, but the more background I got it, the more comfortable I felt with it. So.
Well, I think that an important part of this is the protections part of it for the staff, because there's certain things that they have to teach, and so I think this helps that. So that's. Does anybody have any other additional comments on that one? Right. So the next one is IHBA programs for pupils with disabilities. This was last revised in 2007. Revisions include reflection on 2022 School Board SB 394 and HB 1513, which both amend the definition in RSA 186-C:2 of child with a disability to include such children until they reach the age of 22. KB Title I, Family and Community Engagement. This was last revised in 2019. These are minor revisions, only since most substantial updates were captured after the 2016 changes to passage of ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. Does anybody have any questions, or there just any discussion on any of these policies that additional? If not, if anybody wants to make a motion to move these to second read.
Second?
I think that was Carl. All in favor? Any discussion? Okay. All right, so we are at board comments and correspondence. Jay, do you have anything? I do not have anything. Andy? Carl? Oh, Carl has a book.
So I went to the conference. I learned a lot. There was some different discussions. There was some stuff that was voted on. Basically, it's when the delegate assembly votes on it, it means that the New Hampshire School Board Association is going to try to push for changes in laws. So some of the stuff that passed, I didn't vote on some of them because I wasn't quite sure how we would vote as a board, but it was never close. It was either generally one way or the other. One of them was that local control should remain. If a teacher, there's a disciplinary issue for the teacher, it should go through the local school district first before going to the DE, and the emphasis should not be on the DOE first. That there should be local control on materials used in schools before it's the DOE or something bigger. Try to streamline recruiting for teachers. This was an interesting one, is to get the state law to be changed so that the town election officials can delay a town election if there's inclement weather, which would be fairly interesting.
Sure would.
Because it would definitely have affected us. Try to increase school building aid. We should fund universal pre-K. Greater flexibility to allow school districts to give free and reduced lunch. And there was one that had a lot of discussion but didn't pass, was to allow school boards to have remote, so say Chairman Smith, if he was not in town, could have called in on a regular process of that, which had been suspended previously. But that one got voted down, and people thought that it was important that school board members were in front of the public and in person. So yeah, that was pretty much the quick version of it. And I'm willing to discuss with anybody more about it. So.
Great, thank you. So we will move forward to consent agenda. Mr. Thompson?
Okay, the first item on the consent agenda is the personnel report. There is no personnel report. So moving on to the superintendent's report. Just a couple of very quick items. So last Tuesday, 10/17, we hosted a parent evening that we called Empower, Engage, and Educate. And it was an opportunity for us to talk with parents who were prospective or present volunteers, and to talk to them about what some of the opportunities are for volunteerism. And then really to kind of go through and talk about some of the key components of being a highly effective volunteer. The evening went very well. Admittedly, the attendance was a little low. People are busy. But the great thing is we had good conversation. They provided great feedback on our presentation. It's our hope to run the presentation again sometime over the winter. And we're in the process of creating sort of a resources page for volunteers and subs as well on our webpage, so that there's a place to go when you have questions about certain components of volunteerism. Again, this links back to the strategic plan, where we want to create additional engagement opportunities with the community. And we also want to create additional volunteer opportunities in our school this year. I'd also like to mention that this week is Red Ribbon Week. Red Ribbon Week is sort of a collaboration between public education and the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency. And really, it highlights the importance of living a drug-free life. It presents opportunities for parents, educators, and community members to reinforce drug-free messages that share with their children throughout the year. Again, these are critically important. No community is insulated from substance misuse, whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it's vaping. These are real-world issues. They exist here in Hampstead, so it's important that we have conversations about these things. It's, our schools are very proactive in offering really a laundry list of clubs and activities and opportunities for kids to participate in things after school. That is the best anti-drug prevention that you can do. So I've had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time here, specifically at the middle school, but I know both schools are engaged in some really great activities. There's a lot of spirit during Red Ribbon Week. Also just wanted to mention that I have the good fortune, both myself and Mrs. Milbury next week, of attending the Nature's Classroom overnight field trip with 7th grade. So we're headed out to the Seacoast for 3 days and 2 nights of experiential, hands-on science. So I'm very excited. This is actually my first. I've been to Washington, D.C. a million times. I've never been to Nature's Classroom. So I'm very excited for this opportunity to work closely with staff and students. So that's it for my report. If the board has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
I do not.
Questions?
Okay, so other business, old business, anything? And we are no non-publics that I'm aware of.
There's not.
So at that, we will adjourn this school board meeting at, what time is it? 8:19 p.m.